Well, hey, mamas, Jessica Coulter here. We are wrapping up our series all about cramming for finals. Our focus today, the actual day of the final, the actual strategies your team needs to use when sitting down to take that final. Keep in mind, the things we're talking about today start with your teen actually waking up on the day of his final. So, we've talked about study strategies, we've talked about the pre-work, we've talked about the expectations. Those were the other 3 videos, so definitely want to check those out if you missed them. But before we dive into what these test-taking strategies are that your team needs to use on the day of the final, I want to know, since we've been talking about finals all week, when is your teen's next final? Does your teen actually have a final on Monday? Do we have a couple weeks? Let me know down below, because I know college students generally take their finals earlier. So curious where your teens are at in this scheme of things. Also want to tell you, there's a link in the description for us to set up a time to talk, you, me, and your teen. We'd love for us to meet and talk about this more, talk about your teen study habits more, and find out how I can help there be no more cramming in your teen's future. But let's talk about this. We're talking about test-taking strategies. Now, like I just kind of hinted at, it's very, very important to realize, mamas, if your teen is cramming until like an hour before the test, doesn't get any sleep before the final, doesn't eat breakfast before the final, and when I say eat breakfast, I mean something more than like a swig of coffee or like a donut. We actually want there to be some protein in there, some actual food. Okay, we want your teen to have the sleep and the breakfast, because without those 2 things, these strategies I'm about to share, they're not going to help your teen very much. Okay, so it's so important that sleep actually happens before each and every final. It is so important that your teen actually eats something before the final too. Okay, like our brains literally do not work without food, without sleep. Okay, now another thing I want to mention, and this is a test taking strategy, not necessarily sitting down to do the test, but it's important. Parents, when your teen did that pre-work, when they're asking the teacher, what's going to be on the final, what chapters, is it cumulative, what should I study, your teen also needs to have asked, where's the final happening, when's it happening, and can I use anything on the final, like a note card, like my notes, like a formula sheet? Is there anything resource-wise I can use on the final? Because your teen needs to know, okay, I usually meet in this class. Is this the same class my final is going to be in? Because it's pretty common for there to be like multiple subjects with the same teacher, but different technically classes. So like what I mean, like for me with OChem, there were 3 classes of OChem, met at 3 different times of the day, but yet we were all still in the same class, same subject, same unit, if you will, basically, but different sections essentially. So they put us all in the same room for the final. The same thing might happen to your teens. It might be a different day of the week than normally meets. Could be a different time. Your teen has to know that in order to actually take the final. Because your teen can do all this work. Your college student can ask all these questions. But then if your teen shows up at the wrong place at the wrong time, it's kind of pointless, okay? Also, we need to know the time and then, like I said, what resources. Because some teachers are really nice and let kids bring a note card. Some teachers are nice and say, here's the formulas I'm going to provide. You don't have to memorize them. Okay. But do know it's up to the teacher, up to the school policy, so many variables. Okay. So now that we've talked about what to do as soon as your teen wakes up in the morning and where your teen needs to actually go, because hopefully it goes without saying, but I'll say this to you, mamas, in case your teens need the reminder, we want your teens to be early. Now we want them to show up to finals early. We want them to show up with what they need, what they can have, and everything possible they need to be successful on that final. So I know you're waiting and be like, Jessica, just tell me, what does my teen do sitting down and once that time actually starts? Well, I'm going to make you wait another minute or 2 before I tell you what those actual strategies are when your teen sits down. I want to say thank you to everybody watching on Facebook and on YouTube. I'm Jessica Coulter, CEO and founder of Ace Cookie Tutoring and Study with Jessie. So I help teens love to learn through study skills. All right. So if your teen doesn't know how to study, doesn't know how to do homework, doesn't know how to learn, I gotcha. Okay. So be sure to subscribe, be sure to follow, and would love to talk to you and your team. But let's get back to it here. Let's talk about the test taking strategies. Because remember, we're talking about students who have crammed. Okay, because what your teen's going to do on a test when he's crammed for this final or this test is way different than if your teen had several days, several weeks to prepare. Okay, so the first thing, and almost the big thing I can tell you that's generally very, very useful for students who have crammed is if they do some kind of brain dump, or as my sister would call it, some kind of brain vomit. Okay, if your teen is taking this online or in person, on paper, whatever, if your teen is allowed to have paper before your child ever reads a single question on the test, it is so helpful to just write down everything that your teen remembers. Okay, so your college student, your child needs to be conscientious of time though. Okay, if your teen knows there's 100 questions, I've got an hour, he needs max of 5 minutes to write down anything and everything I should have said, that he remembers. So formulas, definitions, terms, things that the teacher talked about in class, things that were on the study guide, anything that your teen has in his mind related to the final needs to be written down, but it's got to be quick. I mean, like I said, if it's allowed and your team can take notes, some kind of scribble, some kind of brain dump, do it fast. The reason for this is if your teen has put a lot of information in his brain in a short amount of time because he crammed, well, unfortunately, that means it's not really there. Like it's surface level, but it's not understood. It's not going to be remembered in the long term. Okay, and that also means that if your teen sees something on the final and he's like, whoa, what is this? It's going to lead to some serious forgetfulness of what has been studied. It's also going to lead to some serious forgetfulness and kind of overwhelm due to a lack of confidence. And so if your teen immediately goes, oh my goodness, I'm so dumb. Oh my goodness, I don't know this. Oh my goodness, I'm going to fail this. All those thoughts are going to hurt your teen's chances of remembering what he actually studied. And it's going to ultimately hurt your teen's grade on that final and probably the class overall. But if your teen takes the time to write down a bunch of stuff that he does know right now, as soon as he sits down to take the final, he now has notes. He now has a study guide. Your child now has something to look at while taking the final. Okay? The other big tip to give you, mamas, and really we want your teens to do on the finals, is we want your teens to go through the final quickly. Okay, again, the idea here, everything's surface level. Only certain things are remembered. Only certain broad overall ideas are remembered. We want your teen, especially if this is like a multiple choice, the matching questions, whatever, we want your teen to go through the questions quickly and go, yep, I know this. Nope, no idea. What is this? Oh, yeah, I remember this. And we want your teen to have those kind of mental conversations. Because if your teen reads something and goes, I don't know, well, then there's no point in your teen spending any time on that question. But if your teen reads something, you're like, oh, yeah, I studied that. That would be worth answering it right then and there, possibly using that brain dump that your teen did to help. Okay. But the idea here is if your teen sees a question, I don't remember this at all, that is not a question we want your teen spending time on. Okay. Because again, pretty much all finals are timed. And it could be, nice, couple hours. It could be really short, like an hour, 200 questions. I mean, it just depends. So your teen, one of those important test-taking strategies is for your teen to manage his time during the final, to realize how many questions, to realize how much time per question he has, let alone how much time overall for the final. Okay? So definitely have your teen go through those questions quickly. Because it can always come back to questions, especially if it's something of, oh yeah, I sort of remember that, or I wrote something similar to this, or a part of this on the brain dump, or I sort of remember studying it. That's worth a couple extra minutes versus a question where your teen just laughs and goes, no idea what this is talking about, or, oh wow, I didn't even study that. So definitely some ideas, some strategies. We could talk for a lot longer, mamas, but want to give your teens some ideas on what to actually do if there's a final, say on Monday or very, very soon. So thank you so much for watching. Do know I would love to talk to your teens more. I'd love to talk to you more, mamas, about studying, about preventing these cram sessions in the future. So if you'd like to know more about how I can help your teen learn how to learn through study skills, so your teen can actually love to learn, Schedule a free strategy call, a call and a talk with Jesse. Add the link in the description. Thanks so much. Talk to you soon. And remember, go to the link, choose a day and a time that works best for you so we can talk about your teen and study skills. Bye.